Welcome back. You're watching the development agenda for Budget 2011. We are discussing the crucial issue of India's infrastructure deficit, and joining me to discuss this is the noted expert in the infrastructure sector, Mr. Gajendra Haldia, the author of the Landmark Electricity Act, as also of several model concession agreements which are noted for having brought in a lot of private sector funding into this sector. He is now the advisor to the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission on Infrastructure, and clearly a person who knows more than anyone else perhaps about this entire issue. Thank you, Mr. Haldia, for joining us to discuss this very important issue, and we are discussing this in the run-up to Budget 2011. Let me begin by first asking you that we are soon going to enter the terminal year of the 11th five-year plan, a plan which had pegged for the first time a huge amount of investment, $500 billion for the infrastructure space. What, according to you, is the status of that funding? Has it come in? What is the success that we have achieved?
You know, we went through the global downturn, and that sort of slightly depressed the flow of investment, particularly private investment. But the good news is that on a macro basis, we will still be close to 500 billion. There have been some shortfalls in sectors like highways and ports, but that has been made up by sectors like telecom. So overall, the country will see investment of about 5 lakh, about 20.5 lakh crores, which is $500 billion. So we hope to be very much there, more or less.
Take, for example, the power sector. Clearly the biggest need for this country, and you know, I think all projections are clearly below estimates. We need more power than what we produce. There are UMPPs that have been bid out, but we see constant delays.
I think the whole message or the framework contained in the Electricity Act was towards creation of a competitive market. If you go to any country in the developed world, you will find that a consumer, especially a bulk consumer, can choose from among competing suppliers.
Which is not happening.
That creates a market. And when I have a choice and when suppliers can supply to me, then they invest and produce and they can supply to me because there is an access. In the power sector, the incumbents, especially in the state level, at the distribution level, have simply prevented competition from happening. No consumer, howsoever large, has a choice of buying.
Despite the law being in place.
Despite the law being in place since 2003. So that's the major problem. The day this starts happening, you will see a turnaround beginning to happen in the power sector. So the good news.
But how will it happen, Mr. Haldia? Because you know it all really. So how will it happen? Is it a question of political will?
I think it is also a question of political economy, as you are putting it. There is in the states the desire to hold on to the monopoly. There is a lot of politicization of electricity distribution. But it is beginning to assume crisis-like proportions. In the current year, the losses of distribution companies are going to be about 60,000 crores. According to the Finance Commission, these losses will rise to 1,16,000 crores in about 3 years' time. So it's simply unsustainable.
All the good work of the T&D reforms is sort of being done away.
Everything will come under a great stress, because if the distribution companies are not viable, then producers can go on producing, but there will be no channel by which you can sell this electricity.
And therefore no incentive to generate power.
Exactly. That's why you will continue to have shortages. So the message is writ large. The issue really is how fast we can respond. Will we respond only after a full-scale crisis, or will we somehow fix the situation before that?
Are you confident about the generation picture, given the fact that a lot of projects are now in the pipeline?
You know, if more generation is coming up, you also have to recognize that more demand is getting created. And since the distribution network is unviable, this whole equation won't sustain for long. So there will continue to be shortfall in generation, there will continue to be shortages. The ability of the distribution companies to buy from generators and sell to consumers will remain constrained, will become increasingly suspect, because the losses will be rising. If they won't have the money, how will they buy the power generated? So you will see, if this continues, you might see a reduction in investment in generation over time.
How confident are you that the highway program can really take off in terms of the expectations of the public?
I'm quite optimistic about highways. Actually, it was not moving well, say 3 or 4 years ago, because of the incumbent resistance to allow private investment, to allow PPPs. Then about 3 or 4 years ago, the Committee on Infrastructure led by the Prime Minister put an enabling framework and gave targets, right? So in the initial years, there was a slow response. But then everything was sorted out and large number of projects were structured and approved and were about to be awarded, bid out. At that time, unfortunately, the global downturn happened, and so there was a lack of response from the private sector because everything was in a mess. But many projects were ready. After the global downturn was sort of resolved and investment was coming back, then we saw a steady rise in the award of projects. So a lot of projects have been awarded in the last 2 years, and this is far more significant, much greater investment than ever before. But I would still say it is much short of the potential. So hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years, we should be able to achieve a much larger volume of investment in the highway sector.
In number terms, can you throw a number at how many kilometers we'll be able to add?
Well, the announcement that the Prime Minister made was for 20 kilometers a day. If you convert it into an year's target, it is 7,300 kilometers. Quite clearly, you can complete that kind of, length only if you have awarded. So first thing is our focus should be on award of concessions. What this really means is that let's take the next year. This year, of course, there will be shortfalls. We might be able to award 4.5 or 5,000 kilometers. So we'll be significantly short of the 7,300 benchmark.
Yeah.
But in the next financial year, if our preparations are okay and if NHAI performs well, I have no reason to believe that they can't award 7,300 kilometers. So this 20 kilometers a day is very much, within reach and achievable.
There is now a new fund that is being spoken about, perhaps $10–11 billion. Can you provide us some insight on that?
As I mentioned, 50% of the 12th plan investment will come from the government, hopefully. Now that's simple and straightforward. Government budgetary allocations going by, say, let's say about 15, 16, 17% per year. Now, more than that is not possible. So that takes care of the government expenditure. The remaining private investment, which is 50%, and which means over 20 lakh crores, we feel that getting equity resources of that order will not pose such a problem, but debt will.
Yes.
Because the ability of the Indian banking system to grow so fast and divert so much money for infrastructure projects is going to be very constrained. And that is why we've been talking of innovative measures such as the debt fund, where what we are expecting to do is to get long-term funds from insurance, pension, foreign insurance and pension funds, multilaterals, etc. And then supplement the banking, debt resources with this kind of inflow. So, and maybe some other policy measures will come up, and the finance minister might, announce other, policy measures which will attract the inflow of debt. So, I think the main problem is going to be provision of debt, and government has set up a high-level committee on financing of infrastructure. So, we're going into all these details, and hopefully, some measures will emerge and will probably get taken.
Will they be ready in time for the budget?
It is not entirely related to the budget. So this is a committee which has to, it's chaired by Dr. Rakesh Mohan.
Yes.
It has all the prominent,
specialists,
actors and experts in this field. The term of the committee is 18 months, and it has begun its work, so we might give a few interim reports. So it's a question of, devising various innovative measures and persuading the various ministries, and particularly the finance ministry, to carry them forward. And hopefully by the time 12th plan begins, we would have introduced a couple of measures which will enable more debt to come in.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for talking with us today. That was Mr. Gajendra Haldia, noted expert on the infrastructure sector, talking about the way forward for infrastructure. Clearly, the union budget has a limited ability to do direct interventions, but what is perhaps clearly coming out from the conversation is that the way forward is rosy. A lot of work needs to be done, but progress is inevitable as far as fulfilling India's infrastructure deficit is concerned. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of the Development Agenda for Budget 2011. We'll be back again next week. Thank you for watching.